Before we get into this week's episode of Critical Hit, I just want to say thank you to everyone who's supported our work over the years, and we want to continue to create great content for you for years to come. Many more games in the coming weeks. Don't worry. Plenty of stuff to keep your ear holes occupied. But first, did you know that Harry's just came out with their sharpest blades ever? And unlike some other razor companies, they're not charging you more for their product improvements. This is what I like a lot. Sharper blades, still $2 each. Now, I've been using Harry's razors for years. I've talked about it right here on the show. So many of you comment on it, and I use Harry's razors all the time. Now, I'm not an everyday shaver. Some people shave once a day. Some people shave once a week. Some people, maybe you shave once a month. But I always enjoy the nice, clean, close shave that I get using a razor from Harry's. Now, there is a special offer for our listeners, new U.S. customers. Now, this is for our U.S. listeners. You can redeem a trial offer of Harry's new sharper blades by going to harrys.com/critical hit. I know what you're thinking. How sharp are these new blades? These new blades are so sharp that in a study with guys shaving 4 times a week, the guys reported that with Harry's new blades, their 8th shave was as smooth as their first. It's a miracle, I tell you. And we've said it before. Harry's delivers quality blades at a low price because they own a German factory that's been making razor blades for 100 years. And they stand by a 100% quality guarantee at harrys.com. So here's what you need to do. Give Harry's sharpest blades ever a try. Harry's has an amazing offer for listeners of my show in the U.S. New U.S. customers can redeem a Harry's trial set at harrys.com/critical hit. You'll get the 5-blade razor featuring the new sharper blades. Oh, I can't wait to get these and test them out myself. A weighted handle, foaming shave gel with aloe, and a travel cover to protect your blade when you are on the go. So what are you waiting for? Just go to harrys.com/critical hit and redeem your trial offer today. Thanks, Harry's, for sponsoring this episode of Critical Hit. And now, let's take a listen to this Void Saga wrap-up panel. Welcome to Critical Hit, a Major Spoilers podcast. Thank you so much for downloading and checking us out this week. And for many of you, you have had an entire week to decompress from the final episode of Rodrigo's Void Saga tale. We've had a couple of weeks to think about everything that has come on, and there's just so much in our minds at the moment that it is probably better that we, the players, don't run the wrap-up session of the Void Saga. Instead, we have Polygon's own Tasha Robinson here, who is going to moderate the panel for us this week. So, Tasha, welcome.
And the crowd of one goes wild. Hello, all. It's nice to meet those of you that I have not talked to.
Now, I will say this. Tasha has been a huge fan of Critical Hit.
Super fan.
For forever. In fact, she has a different name on the Major Spoilers website than she does on Twitter, and it took me forever to figure out that they were one and the same. Because I was just like, oh, somebody on the Major Spoilers website just made a comment about that. And then she was like, yes, that's me. And I was like, oh, okay. So Tasha has been around for a long time. She reached out and said, please, 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 can I moderate your final panel? And I was like, this sounds like a great idea. So Tasha, please take it away.
I love it that you're enthusiastic about me literally inviting myself over to your home.
This means I had to do zero work.
So I'm a longtime friend of Sam's, and I came to Critical Hit when she joined the podcast, and almost immediately I started from the beginning. So I've been with it for about 5 years, and Sam can certainly testify that I have pestered her endlessly about behind-the-scenes stuff, about character decisions, about what went into various things. So I feel like this is kind of my last big blowout chance to ask everybody questions. But before we kind of get into like a little historical stuff, a little character-specific stuff, I guess the big question is just, it's been, as we're recording this, about 2.5 weeks since the first people listened to the finale. It's been 2.5 weeks of kind of celebration and sadness for all of you on social media. How are you feeling about the end of the Void Saga? How are you feeling about the response to it?
I like it.
Yeah, the response has been fantastic. A lot of people
telling us how much Critical Hit has meant to them and how much we've been a part of their lives. That's kind of amazing and a little overwhelming and scary to hear, but I love it. And thanks to everyone who let us know how much it meant to them.
Yeah, it felt really, really good to hear from people, and hearing how much it's grown with people, and hearing all of the people who talked about how it inspired them to DM or become better DMs, or all of that. It feels really good.
Yeah, my favorite thing is over the years, but especially now with all the people that are sending in emails and here's what I think about it. It's like, oh, I started listening to this when I was a wee 8-year-old, and today I'm 42 and have 6 children going off to college. And I'm being, super exaggerated there, but seriously, that's the way it's been. Is that people have I've been listening to you since middle school, or I started listening to you in high school, and I went to college, and now I'm married, and we have our own kids over this entire time. And so it's really interesting to see the listeners grow and stay with us for all that time. So I'm always blown away by that.
I had a week of just complete sadness. I was just wrecked for about 3 days, and then was just kind of melancholy for the rest of the week. And at that point, the 2 episodes before the one that we had just recorded came out, and people were like, oh, well, we've still got a couple of months worth of Void Saga. So everything's fine, even with this going on. And I'm just like, oh, you poor, poor people. And I'm fine now. I was fine then, but it was one of those things where I was in my mourning cloak for a few days.
Oh, and people ask all the time, how far ahead are you and those kinds of things. And I'll straight up tell people, you got a couple of episodes, and that started freaking people out. It's like, oh, you mean a couple more episodes, and then we go into the end game. I'm like, no, you got a couple more episodes. And then people started freaking out. So a lot of people were kind of dreading the end of the Void Saga.
Yeah, that's the one response that I really wasn't expecting was the anxiety around it. A lot of people were straight up anxious, upset about the end of the Void Saga, and I do apologize for that. Obviously, that wasn't our intent, but that's the one thing that surprised me. I was expecting people to like it, people to not like it, but I wasn't expecting people to dread it to such a degree.
Well, I would put myself in that boat, and it's primarily because I came to the show, as I said, in 2015, which was just a year of upheaval for me. The job that I was in went away, my father died, and Critical Hit got me through just a very emotional, depressed time. And what I'm seeing is kind of a consistent thread in a lot of the people that are emotional and anxious about it is a sort of a combination of change is hard, which is ironic given the theme in particular of the final arc. And it's hard to let go of something that's meant a lot to you emotionally.
That is very true. That's I think maybe truer for listeners than for players.
And people certainly do get attached to this. We don't have to go back too far into the run of the show before I had a major meltdown over, oh my God, is Orm dead? And we had to spend 2 episodes talking Steven off the ledge so that everything would be okay. And it drove people up the wall about it. But, it's one of those things that I was already attached to Orm at that point. And I can see how over the years, other people relate and attach to the different characters and the different storylines and just get engrossed and involved just like they would a really good book series that comes to an end. So I can really understand where you're coming from on that, Tasha.
So honestly, one of the things that got me through that period of anxiety and sadness over it ending was talking to Rodrigo. I'm in a game that he runs. And I know him sort of tangentially from a time period where he went to college in the town that I live in. And as he started bringing in all of these aspects of the finale that I hadn't seen in terms of foreshadowing details and story details, I started to get really enthusiastic just about the structure. So that might be a good pivot point, Rodrigo. You want to talk about say the monster with the clipboard or the Lady Devil, some of these elements that in some cases the players kind of figured it out, but you can at least confirm for us.
Sure. What was the point of the devil with the clipboard? Who figured it out?
Go ahead, Matthew.
I did not. So if you did, you should tell him.
The devil with the clipboard was there to confirm. Basically, he was a person there for the Cobalt Alley guys to confirm that Ket was entering and bringing in an appropriate team to face Asmodeus in that final challenge.
That's right. He was signing you in. What about the devil lady?
Oh man, so many people think that was Guy all grown up.
Yeah. Do you guys agree with that?
That was the best one I could come up with, but I don't know.
Yeah,
I mean, I asked that in character, and I thought that was the best thing I could think of.
Yeah. There's a lot of stuff that I put in, and the glorious thing about 4th edition combat is that it's so dense that you can't remember what happens immediately before or after. So it really allows me to hide things really for the audience, where I'm like, there's no way the players are going to pick up on this, because they then have to switch their brains to these other things. But yeah, I seeded a lot of what was going to happen in the tower, and even before that. And honestly, I'm constantly doing that throughout the show. And sometimes players get it and sometimes they don't. Sometimes the audience gets it and sometimes they don't. Or, it'll take 2 or 3 years before somebody was like, were you doing this? And I'm like, yeah, I was.
Well, given Guy's arc in general, being a spy that nobody wanted to believe was a spy, I thought it was pretty funny that he is still working, she now is still working for Asmodeus, loyally and faithfully, and everybody just assumed that she was there to help Ket, that she was some sort of secret force on his side, which just kind of, brings it all back home, exactly what went down there. Anything else we should have particularly watched out for in the finale? Anything you want to call out?
Anything else? I guess pretty much every line of the poem is like relevant, either to something that happens in the finale or to past things on Critical Hit. So it's just loaded with meaning.
Can I ask what the owls were? Because I didn't know that one.
The owls were just cool guys, but the owls were mentioned before. Magoubliet mentions the owls because they basically, Asmodeus and the owl guys are basically the guys that mounted the assault on Magoublistan. Or not Magoublistan, but Snapstab.
All right. So when he said to them, like I told you, like I taught you, was that just referring to kind of the tactic of separating the group, or was there more to it?
It was mostly that. It's, this idea of getting them apart, and also possibly like get them apart and, make sure that they can't tell that they're supposed to win this one.
Well, you mentioned that you sometimes seeded little hints, like long in the past, about upcoming arcs, upcoming ideas. I feel like the first one of those I encountered was listening to the 2015 story arc at the same time I was going back. And somewhere around maybe episode 120, you were already teasing the Salamander's Coil as a plot. Were there far back hints about how this story was going to resolve, what the finale was going to be like?
Probably not that far back, but certainly we meet a lot of the players in the Celestial Crusade arc, and the biggest one being that everyone except for Asmodeus signs up to fight the Void, and everybody takes losses except for Asmodeus, who's then so much farther ahead. As far as little things being seeded, a lot of the stuff that happens afterwards, and that happens even immediately afterwards, is based on like the things that the players do, right? It's like so much of the Void Saga comes from Ket's decisions that half the time I didn't have to come up with like big reasons as to why something would happen. I'm just like, oh yeah, Ket decided to do this, so I'm just gonna go with that. And I'm just gonna extrapolate this to like its worst possible consequence.
Oh, so it is all Ket's fault.
Yeah, it always has been.
Oh, we're definitely going to get into Ket's decisions in a little bit. I've got a bunch of questions for kind of individual people digging into their characters and their character arcs. But before we leave kind of the idea of the finale and the overall arc here, I'm curious about the Obsidian Huntress. She feels like the big element that we got teased over and over, but that we never really got into. Do you want to talk about either what you built with her or kind of like what her place in the story was?
Sure. So when I first started putting together the finale, I did want the players to go and talk to the Obsidian Huntress, but as it started taking shape, and I was like, I want to do this sort of like mirror version of basically both sides of the season, where the players all go to these like the places where they're normal, and then they revisit them again after they've been conquered. There wasn't going to be a way to call back to that with Endgate, because Endgate starts out on the bad guy side, and we could show it being worse, but there kind of wasn't anything that I could really think of to like basically flip that over. And because of that, the Obsidian Huntress kind of drifted back as just like a general baddie that is basically causing all of these like wraiths and stuff to appear. And that's, that became both a thematic and a gameplay reason to not explore her more. And I mean, I would have been happy to explore her more, but also I have a keen sense of like, things have been going on for way too long with like any given thing. And I'm like, I need to wrap this, and I need to like basically keep the story moving. So I just kind of had to cut her from the script.
Well, I had definitely been planning on trying to confront her as Ket at some point. Like, that was a huge motivation for Ket during the lead up to Vecna's place, was wanting to confront her because, well, what the hell?
What would that confrontation have looked like? Did it ever occur to you, Rob, to try to give up the part of her soul that she had given him and see if he could change her back into something that would be on the party's side?
It might have, had we actually gotten the chance to confront her. Like, I wanted to go to, what did you say it was?
Endgate.
Endgate, that one. I wanted to go to Endgate. She was one of the gods that I had actually put on my list of gods to convince to sign the pact, despite her being on Asmodeus' side. Because Ket was supposed to have that whole history with her. But I never got any point to what I would offer her, unlike a number of the other gods I had, like specific things that we could offer them and whatnot listed out.
Were there other gods on the table, Rodrigo, that you put a lot of background work into, that you want to say anything about their lore, what you developed for them?
Not too much. I specifically kept their lores a little bit more ambiguous because I didn't know where the players were going to go. When things started to take shape, it became more obvious which places the players were leaning towards. But pretty much all of them got these sort of like secondary things as to what had been going on when, like, after the time skip. And my favorite was, I want to say, that Mesco, they were conquered. So this is the writhing nest, right? Mesco being the healing and poison goddess, and she surrendered, but stipulated that she was just going to kill whoever was in charge. So basically, everything's allowed to continue, but she's going to kill the governor, basically the appointed governor of the place, like every few weeks or few months. So there are a few things like that. The players got the majority of them from talking to Salath, but there were a few here and there that probably never got mentioned or never got talked about, or that the players actually got read over and were like, well, let's not go there, and like never really mentioned it out loud. And there's kind of a lot that ends up happening like that, where I'll give them a piece of information, or the players will have a piece of information, and for whatever reason, it just doesn't get talked about right away. And so even though the players know it, the audience might not hear about it for a long time. or it just nothing ever comes of it because another player who has something that they could do about it kind of never hears it.
Before we move off the finale, I guess the one other thing that you'd brought up with me as a bit of foreshadowing was what Magubliat said about how you could never beat Asmodeus. You could just get him to a point where he didn't think it was worth the game anymore. And it seems like that's exactly what happened. So it seems like at that point you had a pretty good idea of what was going to happen. Do you have a sense for how far back you knew?
Well, as somebody pointed out, I had an idea for it as far back as Haze of Shadows, because it has the same ending. But spoiler alert. And that was a thing where I was like, oh, if I do this now, because I had the idea to do it now, I'm like, if I do this now, I'm not going to be able to do this for the Void Saga. And I was like, I might just do it for the Void Saga anyway. Nobody's going to remember. It's going to be 1,000 years before we get to it. And sure enough, most people haven't. But although somebody pointed it out on the Discord, which is good. But yeah, that was one of the endings that I had in my pocket, and I've had it for a long time. And what shape that exactly took was different and changed depending on what the players did. But it's sort of like the arrival at it was slightly different. I also had a couple of things in my pocket in case the players did some different stuff. And we didn't, as things were developing, I was like, okay, well, this one's probably not going to happen. And then it was kind of a binary proposition after that. But the players kind of ended up going more or less in the direction that I expected them to. And granted, if you've been playing or listening to my shows for a while, you'll see me expand the borders and be like, okay, players, do what you want. And then you can see me just funnel them into, basically what's going to happen next after they've made their decision. So sometimes, it's like, well, could the players have decided at that last moment to do something else? It's like, yeah, but would they have? And were there any other viable options at that point? Probably not so much.
So that kind of takes us to a place of philosophy about mailbag questions in general, the things that the listeners are going to be wondering. And it's something you and I kind of talked about beforehand. Given what you just said, I think the natural thing that listeners are going to be wondering is, okay, so what if the players had done X? What if they hadn't done X? But you don't enjoy those kinds of questions, and you don't tend to answer them. And in the same kind of way, we're getting a lot of listener questions about what happened to Ket's family? Where are the cogs right now? What does the thing that shatters the sky look like right now? What's Ket Modius in charge of? You also don't really want to address those questions. You want to talk about kind of your philosophy about the aspects of the game that you don't want to talk about?
Yeah, definitely. So as far as the what would have happened questions, and I've talked about these before on the show, I don't like them because they take that power and the consequences away from the players, right? The players do make big decisions in the Void Saga, and to say well, what would have happened if what would have happened if literally anything else? What would have happened if they had decided to go to a different island instead of that very first island, right? If they had try to get out Ranco instead of, or not Ranco, but if they'd gone to the 1,000 Hectare Armory instead of Bleak Forest first. It's like, I don't like answering those because, again, if I tell you what I had planned, then it turns it into a right or wrong thing as opposed to making your best decision and dealing with the consequences. So I try to avoid those. As far as, what's everybody doing now? We never heard back from this character or this character. I like to leave that open for people to think about and for people to wonder because I'm a big believer that once the show is out, people can make it their own and people can think about it in whatever way they want, and they can apply it to their lives or apply their lives to it however they want. Unless you're racist, don't do that. I don't want to tell you what happened to Ket's family because you can think about what happened to Ket's family and what you think should happen to Ket's family and to Prince Elk and to the thing that shatters the sky and to all of these other characters who exit the narrative before the end. It's their narratives are still going. But you kind of, as the audience, get to decide what that is, and it's really not for me to tell you, because even if I tell you, you're not going to like it. So.
Well, speaking of exiting the narrative, guys, I think it's really cards on the table time. There is no point in hanging on to character secrets anymore. I know a lot of you have elaborate backstories that you worked in. I know that some of you had secrets that were big points of the story. Is there anything you want to put on the table now that it's over in terms of your own background lore that the show never got to, or story points that you kept hidden up until the end?
I didn't necessarily keep them hidden, because they did come up once or twice, but there is a very long email chain between Rodrigo and I, explaining and going through a long history of Sakar's adventures with the Parliament of Steel before entering the main portion of the narrative, in different parts of the existing Critical Hit world and through Diamond Throne. And even before he met Randus, we actually created, named a whole party, went through some of their adventures, came up with some MacGuffins and some magical things. And I'm just sad that only he and I are ever going to know about those particular adventures, because they were fabulous. They were as good as the Critical Hit that got to the air, in my opinion. And, I'm a fan as much as I am one of the people on the show. But they were really, really fun stories. And I tried to reference them early on, and I felt like I was forcing it. So I kind of backed off it. But it was one of those things where I'm like, man, there's like 20 episodes, 20 chapters of the show that never, ever got recorded, that in some alternate universe exists, that people are listening to. And I'm hoping that the listeners are now mad and trying to find that alternate universe.
Well, and in true Rodrigo fashion, fortunately and unfortunately, by the time Sakar runs into the Parliament of Steel again, they've changed. They've had new recruits. So because I want a good play experience for Matthew as a player, I have to throw him some surprises. So by that point, the membership wasn't the same. So there are whole characters that are just like gone from that storyline that were part of the storyline.
Yeah, we still don't know where Akula is. She's probably out there stabbing people in the back, and it's just,
You get to decide that.
Oh, then she's definitely out there stabbing people in the back.
What about other people? Brian, I don't think we've heard from you at all yet.
Well, I can't think any backstory things that really wouldn't have been talked about.
We did discuss some of the alternate reality or like alternate timelines that Randos had been in.
Yeah, I kind of feel like we mentioned a good number of them, at least in passing. That's on true. The show. I mean,
I was pretty curious. I was pretty curious about how much of that was improvised, just because you always seemed to have something to hand in terms of what this last world was like or what you'd seen before.
Well, glad to hear that. I'd say a good portion of it was improvised. Like Rodrigo, gave me like 4 or 5, I think, different ones just to kind of give an example of what Randus would have been through when coming up with the next iteration of Randus, and basically allowed me to leeway of decide like what is Randus like now, and basically get the full freedom of structuring that from there. And so I pretty much just had to come up with a good portion of it as I went on, and a good reason as to why I didn't know all the answers, despite having all this experience of having hopped through so many different alternate iterations of this world.
Stephen, Rob, Sam, anything you want to throw out on the table as things you didn't get to?
I don't think so. Only because Orm was basically, I don't want to say blank slate, but he was basically everything people heard was Orm, right? So we devoted season 3, Lords of the Feywild, was all about, to an extent, Orm's backstory with his family and, the things that went through with that. So, there's those things. I know some people had asked, what did Orm do during the 5 years kind of thing? And that was bureaucracy kind of stuff, rebuilding a community, establishing trade routes, those kinds of things. So, I don't think it's anything really exciting. Orym is just Orym doing Orym things.
Yeah, and like similarly to Matthew, before Sparkle entered, Rodrigo and I came up with a lot of adventures that she had had with the Free Enterprise in the Southern Continent, but I'm pretty sure all of them were mentioned in one way or the other. There were a lot of different like factions. Like we really just talked about the Salamander's Coil and like to some degree like Capricorn because Tekiatl/Aluche was involved in that, but there were like it was an extremely well realized Shadowrun world, and like there were a few ideas that we had back and forth that like didn't wind up coming up, but yeah, that's just as Rodrigo says, a lot of stuff like gets created and doesn't necessarily see the light of day because it just doesn't come up, but nothing I feel like I kind of need to get out one way or another.
See, Cobalt Alley, family, semi-orphan, was a police officer, military police type thing. No, I'm pretty certain we actually hit everything that I had put into Ket's backstory. One of the things I was always trying to do with Ket, I thoroughly love Magic the Gathering and the morality system around the 5 colors in Magic, and I always kind of put Ket as a black aligned protagonist because that's
I like it.
Yeah, because those are very few and far between, and that's more or less how I played him. It was all about protecting me and mine. Just what was his kind of grew from the first introduction to the very end of the game.
Well, that's actually a good place to dive into kind of individual character questions. I came up with sort of ways to talk about everybody's arc and kind of the ideas behind them individually. And for you, most of my questions just revolve around motivations and morality. I feel like that's the big mystery of the series. Like he's kind of the Snape of this story. Whose side is he on? Why is he doing what he's doing? Do you think he changed over time in that regard? Like by the end of the story, was he about protecting more than him and his, or was it still just all a way to protect his family?
It was even at the end, it was always about protecting him and his. It was just what he considered his by the end of the story was basically the world at that point, considering what Asmodeus was trying to do. Whereas at the start, it was, make sure his family is safe until his family expands by the end of the Celestial Crusade into the goobers of the other players. But every time Ket goes away for an extended period, it was his people becomes a larger entity.
Do you see that as a process of maturing? I mean, do you see that as a process of morality changing, or is it just kind of an iteration on the same theme?
I would go with an iteration on the same theme. Like I said about Magic, the whole black stance is that morality doesn't entirely exist, or like there's no good or evil. It's just this, and Ket's just making sure what he wants to save is getting saved.
So, was there ever a backstory about what he did to get involved with the Raven Queen in the first place?
It was just Cobalt Alley stuff, wasn't it, Rodrigo?
Yeah. So it's kind of tied up with the stuff that he was doing during that first, like the pilot season and season 2. He was like going around doing stuff and kind of got recruited into basically Erathis' stuff, but also at the same time he had gotten in on Cobalt Alley and was a real luminary there. So that's kind of where that all went. There wasn't a like super specific like this is why this patron is has decided to do this. We kind of kept that mysterious because we're level 5, the gods are very mysterious and we can't punch them yet.
Oh man, I guess kind of to wrap up the line of questioning, there was a really meaningful scene between him and Sparkle, kind of midway through the story, and she asked him on she asked him in the train conversation if he had any regrets, and he said he didn't. Is that still true by the end?
I think the one decision that he would actually regret is giving away the Raven Queen's church. Or not that. It was the flippant reaction to Lolth's dream manipulation. One of the things that Ket absolutely hated was not being in control, and that set him off. So that's where the mistake actually ended up happening.
So, Stephen, I've got some Orym questions for you, but we've got to start with the damn parasitic sword. Mm-hmm. Why was he so devoted to that thing? Why did he love it so much?
It was something that was given early on, right? So Thony gave him this jar with the parasite in it. And so it was just this, I think, early boon that Orym thought of it as that way. And then he found out that this was something that was talking to him and only him, and no one else could hear it. And it would sometimes dispense with advice or sometimes dispense with a thought that would make Orym contemplate a little bit longer. And so I think that there was a bit of a friendship, so to speak, that was being developed with the two. During the 5-year break, Rodrigo and I talked a little bit about the parasitic sword, because I had questions about, I think it was sentient objects, I think is what the question was that he and I were talking about, because my understanding in 4th edition, as sentient objects sit around, they grow more powerful and they have the ability to do more things. And so one of the things that was happening in the 5 years later is the parasitic sword is like talking to the lady in the next room and driving her up the wall and saying things to her all the time, which is why when we came back after that 5-year jump, everyone else in the group started to hear the parasitic sword because it just had become a little bit more powerful. Now,
mechanically, it was more powerful as well.
Yeah. Now, is the parasitic sword evil? I don't think so, because I don't see Thony just giving some evil thing to a young adventurer and saying, "Oh, here, go play with this," and having that be, something that a wizened adventurer would do. So I don't really think that it's evil per se. I think that some of its motives are questionable at times, such as telling it to kill your friends, but at the same time, it really put that blocker in there as like, no, I don't want to kill my friends. Well, okay, then I'm going to be quiet now. So
I don't remember that sword being quiet about the kill your friends question at all. It was kind of a refrain over time. Yeah, I was curious whether part of his attachment to it came from his obvious intimacy issues, his family issues, which were such a big part of kind of the first half of the Void Saga. It feels like his arc is just kind of all about growing up and letting people in a little more, like letting people trust.
Yeah, and also to get rid of his bigotry, that he has at the beginning, because you have to remember, where does Orym grow up? He grows up in a single society with, just basically he and his and the other Eladrin. They are not really encountering a lot of other races. And so growing up as one of the privileged families in there, he's going out into the world and he's heard all these stories about how bad the elves are because they left, how bad the drow are because they left and tried to engage war. So he has all of these things, these misconceptions that has been fed to him not only by his family, but as his society, as his community. And then as he goes out into the world, he starts to realize, oh, a lot of these things aren't true. And so when he does come back to the family, he suddenly has become very changed. And I think that caused a lot of other issues as well. One of the things that Orym had said in this last season was, if I don't have any friends, then I don't have to kill you. I don't have to kill them. So maybe in a sense, the sword is his only friend, because he does want to keep that distance from people. He did see his best friend go away and was never heard from again. He has seen how his actions have caused damage to people. So yeah, maybe that's part of it.
It does seem like a lot of the early stuff in the Void Saga was about him, about his character, about his development, about all of these things that you're citing in terms of his bigotry and his family. And in some ways, he was split between a dramatic and a comic character. But it feels like he evolved into a very dramatic character eventually. That sense of humor was mostly gone. We didn't hear a whole lot about his hair product, for instance, in the final arc. Was that a conscious decision? Was it just because the game was getting more serious? How do you process that?
I think probably because it was a lot more serious, right? This is the end game. The universe is going to fall apart. What are you going to do about that? Well, you're certainly not going to go try to co-op a hotel room because you say that you're on your uncle is the head of the university. You're certainly not going to do those kind of shenanigans because that's not appropriate when you're literally facing the end of all time, in a sense. So yeah, I think part of that, and then part of it is he is, 9 years of game that we played, but also, all of the real-time stuff that would have happened in-game, 5 years plus that. So that, Rodrigo, what did we talk about before? Something like 15, 20 years total for the entirety of this game as things have changed and time has moved around?
Yeah, something like that. So, I was never very good about keeping track of the time to begin with, so it's hard to tell exactly how long the Void Saga takes.
So just imagine however long the real time played out, that it was double that plus 5 years, just because of that gap. So I think people do also mature, or hopefully people are maturing as they get a little bit older, and maybe they realize that, there's a time to joke around and there's a time to be a little bit serious. Plus, Worm did see his entire community get decimated. He did see basically all of the Eladrin in the Feywild almost get wiped out. And then having to rebuild that society kind of probably makes you a little bit more hardened to joking around in frivolity.
That's fair enough. Well, we're going to need to move on to listener questions soon, so we're going to try to speed this up a little bit. Matthew, Stephen did mention the having his best friend never be heard from again, and I know a lot of listeners were in some way hoping that they'd see Torque again. But you've always kind of taken the attitude that he was never heard from again is the end of the story. Like, was there ever a point where you considered bringing him back?
Absolutely not. And there's two reasons for that. One, Rodrigo made it clear, and I agree with him, that consequences in these stories, even when you're dealing with, a story that can be this wild and crazy and, oh my God, we're not dead anymore, these consequences sometimes have to play out. And so when you say he was never heard from again, that's not just an arc word. That's literally, to me, the epitaph. Now, I will tell you that in my head there are Torque adventures going on, but they're not going to be a part of Critical Hit because he was never heard from again. That is a great ending. It's a frustrating ending. It's hard to wrap your emotions around, but it's such a great ending. And I don't think I could have asked for a better out.
Yeah, I like what Texura says in the chat. He says, I miss Torque, but his sacrifice would be meaningless if he came back, almost like the death in comic books thing.
Yeah, that is a very good parallel. Sometimes, especially with the number of rules that we broke, sometimes you do have to just stick to it. And I don't think, unless Rodrigo came to me with the perfect Jean Grey scenario and said, I am behind this 100%, are you? I don't think there's any way I would even consider it, because I don't want that.
Well, with that in mind, Sakar went through some really harsh and horrible stuff in kind of the last arc. And I'm wondering sort of if you see that coming naturally thematically out of what he was. Like, was any of that a consequence for any of his choices beyond, obviously, going against Asmodeus, which is a dangerous thing to do? Where did all that come from for you?
Absolutely. And for me, every character starts with a voice. Every character starts with a voice. Torque is, the standard redneck, my mother's third husband. The Bird was my daughter's endocrinologist. This is a secret that I'm revealing for the first time now. Zanam is Captain Holt from Brooklyn Nine-Nine. But the Sakar voice comes from, you hear it now, don't you? The Sakar voice comes from Yul Brynner. The Sakar voice it is a puzzlement. And that Sakar voice, I realized, when we started playing it, because this is important, Rodrigo and I did not actually have the character on the same page when we were looking at this. I was looking at it one direction. He had the same concept, but he was looking at it from basically the opposite end. I was looking at it as this noble who went off to be a hippie, and he's looking at it as this hippie who couldn't stand being a noble. And to me, that made me realize the truth of Sakar. Sakar is never comfortable. Sakar is always uncomfortable wherever he is. Sakar stands when other people sit. Sakar doesn't want to be part of the nobility, but once he's out, he can't help but keep telling people how he used to be part of the nobility. And what I really boiled it down to, and I think I said it in the last episode, is change is what he does, and he's really, really bad at it. And dealing with the consequences of not just, literal change in character terms, but transforming into other things and just plugging yourself into stupid magic. He doesn't necessarily have to be comfortable. Sakar is that character who sort of lives in the moment of horrible things are happening, and now I'm a giant monster. And my thing after, when we were talking about he's coming back and this is what has happened, the words that kept sticking in my head were drowning in a god and how that would make you feel. And Rodrigo said the wisest thing he's ever said to me, and he says a lot of it, don't just think about how it's going to make him harder and creepier and Charles Bronson. What changes could it have that might make him different or softer or, something entirely different? So I really love that idea of change is a constant for him, and he hates that. But it's literally all he knows.
But it seemed like you yourself were really enjoying it, even if he wasn't. I mean, you leaned really hard into the creepy, dripping, unholy monster imagery during the last arc. Did that, which came first, the chicken or the egg on that one? Did Rodrigo tell you this is how the character's going to change, and then you decided what that would look like? Or did you have an image of him changing that you brought to Rodrigo? How did it all develop?
I think Rodrigo was the first to say it's going to have an effect on his powers and, his collaborative open of what do you think that might look like? And my first thought was, Tetsuo! And I'm like, I'm just imagining Sakar as this gross, writhing Akira-style beastie, not even in control, not necessarily able to be in control. And when that body horror kicks in, I'm like, I hate body horror so much, but I'm also perversely fascinated by it. So making the transformations as grisly and unpleasant for me as possible, I feel made it clear how uncomfortable he was. And I really enjoyed being in pain for 6 episodes. That was so much fun.
Wow. Brian, I've got similar questions for you about Randus's final arc, both in terms of how you decided to reskin him as a Warforged, whether that came naturally out of what he was going through or that was something you'd wanted to do for a while, and whether you enjoyed his pain as much as Matthew enjoyed Sakar's pain.
I don't know if I could say I enjoyed the pain as much. I feel like it largely came naturally. Like I say, when it came to this point to redesign Randus, he pretty much gave me a free rein to do it however which way I'd want. He could have came through these various shifts, changed himself. I just kind of decided myself to, go even more fully into the Warforged route, just have him be even more deteriorated. Basically, in my mind, in that shell, Randus is just kind of like floating pieces of energy more than anything. That's largely how I interpreted that. As just basically he's in this containment suit to largely keep him together and keep him going. He's just kind of like an eternal existential absurdist hero, just constantly trying to push the boulder forward and do what he can to make things better, even though now he's kind of facing an unlimited, possibilities of things that need to be fixed.
See, you talk about that cheerfully. I honestly find that more horrifying than Sakaar turning into a melting pile of monster goo. I mean, do you see that as like an exciting and heroic future rather than a kind of endlessly depressing one?
Well, I think it just comes from my personal philosophy, but yeah, I think it's heroic. I mean, he's still doing what he can to make things better. Even if you look at things at the big picture, it doesn't matter. But where he does happen to end up being, and where he can make a positive change, it's still all the better that he did it, and that particular time, place, location.
I feel like we could ask the exact same question about him originally replacing his arm. Was that something that you and Rodrigo negotiated about beforehand? How did that come about?
It really wasn't so much negotiation. I think it's just more of a, basically you guys probably should have lost and died in this fight, so here's the penalty. And it was largely just at the time narrative flavor. There wasn't any mechanical downfall or penalty that was applied to Randus. It gave me the leeway to take the self-forged Paragon path when we got to that point. But like I say, it's largely just like, you lose an arm, that's the situation now.
Well, I mean, I have the same question in a way for you that I have for everybody else. Like, what do you see as his arc? If anything, Randus almost seems more sort of emotionally stable and consistent throughout the story than a lot of the characters. Like, we see other people grow and change over time. He changed a lot physically, but he always kind of seemed like that same like sweet, capable hero that he was at the beginning. Do you see him as going through major, I don't know, emotional changes?
No, I feel like he always just kind of threw himself into his work more or less, and I kind of imagine basically in the break where he was more or less stuck in trying to run a kingdom that was thrust upon him. That's when he kind of felt like the most lost. So when there is yet another big crisis that he had to go off across the country and the world to follow, I think that that's probably why he seemed that way, because that's where he felt like he had a direct goal and focus and something to do.
Sam, I feel like you're going to get a little shortchanged here just because Sparkle always kind of put her secrets out on the table. She spoke her mind. She told people things about herself. She asked people specific questions. I feel like she doesn't have as many secrets. I feel like her arc is fairly clear. But the big mystery for me is why she decides to leave at the end. Like, why she doesn't feel like it's worth pursuing Ketmodius or whatever you want to call him. Why she decides to go off with Alucia.
Well, see, I always assumed that she was going to I always saw her as pursuing Ketmodius. I just didn't necessarily think that was where Orm and Sakaar were going. Because Orm had made noise about wanting to go home to the Feywild, and I know Sakaar wanted to go deal with his family blood thing, but I 100% always thought that her path would lead her into following what had become of Ketmodius, the Obsidian Huntress, and that staying in the what's it called?
Astral Sea.
That's the one. Yes, with Alucia and Fangs was like actually honestly the best route to that.
So you see her going off with them more as kind of pursuing the ongoing plot of the story rather than staying out, going home, signing off?
Oh yeah, definitely not. I think that was part of the whole, and I feel like Rodrigo and I were on the same page there. With it's like, yeah, we're gonna call your dad and let him know you're okay, but she's not going home to the southern continent anytime soon. Like, there's just too much that's still going on in the Astral Sea that needs to be dealt with. There's going to be power struggles. There's going to be, with the demons all rogue following Asmodeus and rebuilding and coming up with new alliances and rebuilding time. And so, she kind of wants to be one of the forces there where it happens.
Oh, what do you see as her big arc? How did you see her development over time?
I think that the biggest struggle for Sparkle has always been not feeling like she made enough impact. She always thought that for all the good that the Free Enterprise did, that like it didn't do enough. And then when she got embroiled with the party, I think that their somewhat blasé attitude towards saving the world frustrated her so much because she has been someone that like always struggled with what was hard, and like never like fought a lot of losing battles, as opposed to like feeling like she was any one thing was ever guaranteed. And I think that she has had a lot of eye-opening experiences, and that the world is bigger and stranger than she thought, even though the southern continent is very big and strange. But yeah, I think her arc with Tekiatl Aluche was also like pretty interesting. It kind of like I have a weird feeling about secret identities, because I always think that you can't actually like I always find the idea of like Lois Lane loving Superman but not loving Clark Kent, or one way or the other, or like because it's dishonest. And I liked the relationship there, in that she was lying to him and then he was lying to her, and now kind of they're both cards are on the table, but it's also not clear how much either of them are keeping close to the vest. Like, the first few times he asked her to join him, I think that, my answer was yes in character, under the guise of like, if I just say I'm not going to join you, are you going to like sell us out to Asmodeus? I like just never know where you're going to go at any given time. And then like the more things go on, like the more it's like actually, maybe it just does make sense for us to work together.
So at the beginning of the Devilish Research arc, she said over and over, I don't belong here. I don't understand this stuff. This is all over my head. I should not be dealing with gods. Do you think she ever came to a point of comfort with that, where she basically thought, yeah, I belong here. Somebody's got to sort this out?
I mean, I think she certainly did around the time that she killed a god. Yeah. So, but no, it's one of those things that I feel like you kind of sometimes just like you learn by doing. And someone, it's one of those, like, I think that she kind of went back and forth. I feel like she was comfortable with dealing with the bureaucracy, especially with Ket early on, of like, oh, let's like look through all of these contracts. And it's like, oh, well, this is, these are gods, but they're kind of also working kind of like the guilds did in
they're bureaucrats.
Exactly. They're bureaucrats. They have these big organizations and these big interests, and they're clashing against each other, and they have all this history with each other, and they have spies. And it's just like, oh, actually, well, this I can grasp. And, sometimes you can stab them. And the more information you have, the better you're going to be, and being able to talk to people and come up with plans are good. So I definitely think that by the end, she felt like she could make a difference in the Astral Sea, and that's why she decided to stay.
Awesome. Well, we should transition into some of the questions that listeners are sending in via letter. Obviously, there are probably going to be a lot more of those to come. We got a number of them that all kind of fit into the same boat of asking about specific inspirations for the Devilish Research arc. We've got, was the structure of the arc inspired by Dragon Quest XI? Was Asmodeus's elevator inspired by the 2010 movie Devil Elevator? That kind of thing. Rodrigo, are there any specific references or inspirations that you want to acknowledge?
Sure. So the Dragon Quest question, because I think it was shown to me, was not. I didn't base it on Dragon Quest. The idea of heroes get together, then the bad guy smashes them apart, and they're all sent in different directions, and then they all have to get back together. That idea probably actually comes from another RPG, which is Final Fantasy VI or 3, depending on how stuck up you are. And very early on, you kind of get a party together, and then those guys get like blasted into a river, and they all end up in different places, and each of them ends up recruiting different members and by the end, you have this like 20-person party. But I wanted to do something like that. That's probably the earliest that I can think of. As far as the elevator, no. As much as I love my made-up band that is whose songs are all the twist to M. Night Shyamalan movies, Devil Elevator, Ghost All Along. It was actually
Secret
the
Tree
trees.
1865.
Yep. So no, that wasn't meant to be an explicit reference. Critical Hit has a lot of influences from things that were, or not, the Void Saga. See, now I'm doing it. The Void Saga has a lot of influence from things that were formative to me. Most surprising to me once I started realizing it, Animorphs. There's a lot of Animorphs in the Void Saga.
I called Rodrigo on this right after we got introduced to Oversight. I was like, did you get this from Animorphs? He's like, I did.
Yeah. There's a lot that the way that the Deva come to be is very much what the Andalites and the Yeerks relationship is like in Animorphs. I talk about thermals all the time early in the show. Animorphs is like all about thermals. There's a lot of other stuff. There's a lot of gargoyles, like a lot of the consequence of action stuff comes from gargoyles. That was formative for me, like seeing a show for kids that had actual continuity and where things actually happened, and then like you catch back and it's like the members of the pack now look like robots, and it's like, oh, things have been happening in these characters' lives while we haven't seen them. I don't know, there's kind of lots of Japanese RPG stuff going on. I like Shadowrun. I like I'm sure there's something big that I haven't been thinking about. But there's one huge obvious one, and that's Exalted, the RPG by White Wolf, nowadays Onyx Path. There's a lot of the Feywild as portrayed in Critical Hit is very similar to the Feywild as portrayed in Exalted. Not exactly the same. There's a lot of stuff very different. But I got a lot of the ideas from there, and also my penchant for long, flowery names definitely was started up by playing Exalted.
Here's a listener question from another Matthew. We're going to have to give him a different name, so Matthew isn't offended. But other Matthew says, my question is about the unfamiliar items the party found when exploring Vecna's island before the Asmodeus ambush. Were those info from other people Asmodeus was spying on, or were they in fact deeper secrets from the party?
Nope. It was just a room full of red herrings. Like I wanted the players to get really caught up in what they were seeing, and trying to figure things out. And yeah, when I start showing them pieces of their own histories, have them get like weirded out and concerned about it and things like that. And also there is some seeds there, right? It's like one of the things that they find is the symbol of House Oblea, which we later found out Asmodeus has done something to. Like, this is the first we get of like somebody's done something to Sakar's family, so there's lots of little stuff like that. But they were just red herrings mostly. All the extra ones were.
Somebody named Digit, I absolutely love this question, wrote in and asked, how could your Ranco's Island ever be good for trade? The letter goes on a bit, but it basically calls the place, quote, a logistical nightmare, unquote, in terms of navigation, like to the island and around the island.
I don't think navigation to the island is hard. In fact, we determined in the show that finding the island is easy, right? It's through Randus's research, we found that there was like a 0.001 like positive charge to the island that drew things to it. As far as within it, it helps trade the way that any other complication does. You can have a specialized cast or group of people whose job it is to navigate it and thus help the economy by feeding an entirely new industry. Obviously. Come on.
I'm not sure there's a whole lot, obviously, in this game. Declan asked, if you could say one thing to yourself before your first session of the Void Saga, what would it be?
Buckle up.
Buckle up is a good one. For me, I don't know. There's a definite kind of like, don't do it. I mean, it's not like I didn't love my time, but I am sort of like sometimes mildly depressed that the creative endeavor that I spent the majority of my time on was a Dungeons and Dragons game. It's like, I don't even like D&D that much. So it's like, if the Void Saga hadn't been as long or hadn't happened or whatever, we would have been doing other things, right? I'm not like, oh, I hate the Void, and I certainly had a lot of fun and enjoyed it. But sometimes I'm like, man, we drove a lot of people to WotC, and maybe we could have done that for someone else.
My snotty response, the funny response is, don't say F in the first episode, and don't say it 3 times. But the real response for me is, starting as the only remote player, I really wish I would have told myself to stop hesitating and waiting for my spot, because most of the things that I regret about the game are points where I probably should have said something, but I was worried about audio delay or stepping on somebody else, and I held back at a time when I really shouldn't have. So I think it would be just talk, and Stephen will work out the editing as we go.
Yeah, I think for me it would be always remember, edit Matthew Moore. But the serious answer would be, this will be the most fun you have and the worst thing you will ever do. And only because, it's fun playing the game. It's fun trying to figure out, strategy. It's fun to do role play. But I had to edit all this stuff. And, we may play one episode that you hear for an hour, but that one episode literally takes me anywhere from 5 to 8 hours or more to edit. So there's a lot of stuff that it's like, I could be spending time with my family right now. I could be doing other things right now. But I have to get this because I've made that commitment and people love it so much. So, literally is the most fun, but is also the worst. And I mean, it's always going to be, and I don't mean worst as in, oh my God, I'd rather kill myself rather do this. It's just like, there is a lot of other stuff that has to go on besides sitting down at a table and playing a game every week.
Yeah, I try to acknowledge Steven's huge time and monetary sink into Critical Hit, and by extension into the Void Saga. Obviously, none of this would have happened without his, first off, being like, hey, what's this D&D game you guys keep talking about? But also just the huge commitment that he made to it. I feel like I made what in my life feels like an enormous commitment to the Void Saga and to Critical Hit, but it's like a quarter of what Steven ended up doing.
Yeah, but it's still so much fun. Yeah.
Rob, Brian, you have any thoughts for the 2009 versions for yourself?
One.
I don't know, man. I'd be afraid of ruining something if I said anything.
There'd be,
spoken like a
you're never going to be ready for this.
Yeah.
Write down the bloody name, you moron. And make sure you think through your jokes.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a big one for me too.
That's a good advice for all of us, I think.
I don't know. Probably just it's gonna be okay. I was so nervous when I was joining. I don't remember if I've said this out like on like a show before, but I thought, oh man. Because the first session, I didn't know what Rodrigo was planning. I was like, wait, there are 2 other people who aren't part of the regular cast that are on this session. Is this going to be like a reality TV thing where Rodrigo's going to decide which one of us he likes the best, and only one of us is going to go on to actually be part of the show? I was freaking out. So just like calm down, it'll be okay. No, my smug answer is ask Steven to get you a meta microphone before the first show, because my audio for that first episode was terrible, and then he was like, oh God, we need to fix this.
And now you sound wonderful.
Thank you.
So here's another one from Declan. They asked, would you ever consider playing another game set in the vertices? If not, what about creating media of another kind there?
I would definitely be up for creating media of another kind. If Netflix wants to get in touch with us, I would be more than happy to write up a spec.
Treatment.
Yeah, treatment. I went to school for this, so this is terrible for me to not remember what these things are called.
A pitch, a log line.
Yeah,
a Bible.
All of those.
Podcast at majorspoilers.com, Netflix.
You can get in contact with my agent, Steven Schleicher, and we can talk.
Well, we did get a number of questions asking just various iterations on the question. Like, are you ever going to put any of this information into a source book for D&D or other role-playing games? Are you ever going to write a novel set in this world? Is there ever going to be an adaptation? Do you have any thoughts on any of that?
My thoughts on that are that if we get to a point where I or Major Spoilers can hire someone else to do it, I'd be up for it. I am not going to take time to put all this stuff and format it and put it into a source book just because, my notes are designed to run a game out of rather than, except for the stuff that ended up on the site and the stuff that was like sort of front facing to the players. It's just not put together in such a way to make it a world. And also at every turn, like we purposefully wrecked the world to make for like exciting things that were happening. So it's like, what would a source book for the Void Saga even look like? Like we literally destroyed time by the end of it. So it would be difficult, but if we had the budget and the sort of the business plan to do it, I would be all for basically helping or working on that sort of thing.
Well, similarly, a number of people wrote in with kind of variants on the question. At this point, what's your takeaway? What's everybody's takeaway from 4th Ed? What do you think about D&D? What do you think about the system at this point?
I was literally just defending it on a podcast last week and on Twitter. So, I think that it gets that there are things that it does poorly. Like every D&D D20 game throughout time has had things that it does poorly, but I think it got a bad rap for, as Rodrigo said a few times, basically just saying what it is. It's like, okay, do you want to play a tank or a healer or, a striker or a controller? And it's just like, no, that makes me feel like I'm playing WoW. It's like, yep. Are you still role playing? There's a role playing game. I don't know what to tell you. I think that D&D 4th Ed did healing better than any edition has done before or since, in terms of making it compelling for the people playing the healers. I think that it falls apart at higher levels. Like, I apologize for my dog. My husband just got home and she got very excited. But yeah, I don't think it's funny because now I had been just about to sell all my 4th Ed books until Reggie goes like, hey, you want to come on Critical Hit? I was like, oh, I'm glad I didn't get rid of these yet. And I probably am finally going to get rid of them just because it's not really supported online anymore. I've kind of moved on. The world's kind of moved on, but I don't think that I'm happy to have played it for as long as I did.
4th edition is my favorite version of D&D.
I'd agree with that.
It does.
You would agree that it's Rob's
It takes
favorite.
D&D and boils it down to its most basic concept of a combat simulation system.
Mm.
And it does that better than all the other versions do.
Yeah, the balance definitely seems to be pretty wonky in the epic level tier. It really seems to have the sweet spot in the heroic. I feel like that's, if people are ever going to make like a extrapolation or their own version from 4th edition, they largely just need to focus on those first 10 levels and use that. D&D itself has just so much historical baggage to it that it kind of is held back, I feel, in a lot of ways. It doesn't progress to the point that, the 5th current edition seems to be a step back in so many ways. I mean, I guess it was really successful in finding a new audience and reaching a wider audience. So I guess there's a reason why I'm not put in charge of running the franchise, but yeah, 4th edition is probably my favorite iteration of this particular game, and I'd probably be willing to play it or some version of it. I'm kind of tempted to crack out the old Gamma World box set with my friends and try to give that another go.
Well, somebody was going to ask this question. A listener named Cray asks, what were some of your favorite moments from the game as a whole?
I loved any moment that had unexpected emotion, whether it was good, bad, or sometimes completely indifferent. I love the moment in the library with Orem and Torque.
Mm-hmm. That's my favorite part too.
Yeah, for me, I love moments that I don't think anybody else really cares about. I love the moment. There's one moment that never happened that I loved, where Steven was like, "I'm going to do this. I'm going to do this." I'm like, "Do it! You got to do it!" And he couldn't work it in, and it didn't come out. But I love that moment in my head, and that moment happened. As far as I'm concerned, it is absolutely true.
Yeah, real quick, let me jump back to that question about 4E. I was waiting for Matthew to jump in there, but real quick, this is really the first Dungeons and Dragons game that I've played. So 4th edition is my first experience to that. And I really had a lot of fun with it. And I do enjoy 4th edition, but as the others have said, it really falls apart at the higher level. So it becomes a lot more weird to keep up with. So I'm more than happy to try another game in 4th edition. I'd rather do 5th edition. I think one thing that the Critical Hit show, and especially Void Saga, did was show that you can commit to a game system and play it for so long. So that's one of my favorite things. I mean, I think, Rodrigo, Void Saga has lasted almost 2.5 times longer than 4th edition did.
Yeah. Now, the way that I feel about it, now 4th edition is dead. Yeah. Now that we're done with it, now 4th edition is dead.
Yeah, no, I kind of feel that same way. And it's really weird, too, because early on, and I don't want this to sound like sour grapes, but early on, it was like a lot of people were really into this and everything. But the minute 5th edition came out, people were like, if you're not switching to 5th edition, we don't want to listen to this anymore. And it was like very little support from any of the gaming companies involved in this product. And so it was just this really weird feeling to kind of be like that group that was not going along with everyone else and just continuing to do their own thing. I thought it was always really fun about playing this edition, but it was just really weird that people were just like ready to drop you like a hot potato the minute you didn't move off to the new system. And there's people in the chat that are saying, "Oh, I'm glad you guys stuck with this edition." So, yeah, I mean, I had fun the entire time, but I really, my favorite part was, as Matthew said, the Torque and Orem in the library thing.
Yeah. Yeah, or I think that I'll say it unequivocally, the best episode is Boom Boom, because it is the purest, I feel, the purest example of the lunacy that Rodrigo is capable of when he's not having to herd the angry cats that are the players of the Void Saga. But anytime Rodrigo got to be a part of the role play in a very front-facing way, those are always memorable moments. Those are some really great moments, and I love those, which is why, I'm looking forward to more Rodrigo as players as we go forward, because he always he does stuff that I have no idea where it comes from, but once it's there, it's like, why didn't I see that? Why didn't I think of that? Oh my God, this is brilliant. So yeah.
I think about it a lot, because I knew this question was going to come up, and I was like, what is my favorite moment from the Void Saga? And I've really settled on that time where Little Sparkle was wearing a hat of disguise, and she was like faking a head injury, and an NPC, and she looks like a bird, and NPCs in this world are like scared of birds. And the NPC is like, "Oh, well, can I look at your head?" And she's like, "Yeah." I was like, "Do you mind if I take off your hat?" And I'm like, I'm giving it to you here, like, this NPC is about to take off your hat, and like Sam just didn't catch it. She's like, "Oh yeah, sure." Like, takes off the hat and like freaks out, and like everything just like the whole plan just like goes south.
Well, I also didn't know that they were afraid of birds at the time, so that really made it extra special.
Yeah. So yeah, definitely. It was. I think about that scene a lot. And I was like, oh, that must be my favorite one, because there's other ones that I think of a lot, and I'm like, man, I hated that. I could have done that better. And I was like, those are my less favorite ones.
I'm with the unexpected emotional moments, like the train scene with Ket was probably up there for me. I think sometimes I had a lot of fun just touring people around the southern continent, and when I'd be like, yeah, we got to go to Monster Town, and people were like, excuse me?
Yeah, Monster Town, not Monster Town.
Yeah. I would say those were some of the best.
I liked most of the moments that I really enjoyed were the ones where it ended up being like just two players going back and forth for a little bit. Those Life's a Pitch just mentioned in the chat, those quiet moments of conversation. He specifically mentions with Trell, but just any point where it's any two of us going back and forth in character for whatever reason, were always some of the most fun. That and the ability to go back and forth with Rodrigo on an actual mechanical level in fights is one of my favorite things to do anyways.
I mean, Tuberville is now really interesting in retrospect with all the ramifications that came from it. Had someone in the chat mention the pumpkin incident. That's really...
As far as comedy goes, that's one of my favorite bits.
Yeah.
That's your who's on first moment.
Pretty
right
much,
there.
yeah.
Oh, man. The flaming skeletons, I mean, that's just going to haunt forever.
Oh, God. We are such idiots.
Do you remember when you broke reality by rolling a 1 and the rest of the game after that just completely dissolved from that decision?
Oh, boy. I sure do.
This is all your fault. It's not Ket's fault. It's Brian's fault.
Yeah, it's critical or the Void Saga is just drastically changed and made scarier and more deadly by Ket's decisions and Randus's roles.
Yes.
Oh, that's amazing.
Any game with Brian is made drastically better by
Sometimes
Brian's
he
roles.
rolls well. We have some stuff in the can where he's just like knocking it out of the park, I think. Especially when he's running.
Yeah.
Well, we know that there are going to be people who are still listening to the Void Saga, people who are future people right now, people who will discover it in the far future. What are you going to do about the people who still have questions? Are you still going to be taking mailbag questions about the Void Saga like 5 years from now as people get to the end?
Maybe.
I mean, I think we all maintain some form of social media presence, so people can always come to us individually to talk about it. We have a Discord, so people can talk to other fans of the show about it. And I'm sure lots of people, even into the future, would be glad to talk about the Void Saga as they go through their 17th listen through.
Do you have any questions that we haven't covered? Questions for each other, questions for Rodrigo, questions about how it all wrapped?
Oh, I do. What was the deal with those eggs? The make you walk in a random direction things.
Oh, that's right. That was on my short list, and I completely lost it when I transferred these questions to a new doc. What was up with the eggs?
Okay. Well, so in order to understand what was up with the eggs, you have to follow me along on this, in that sometimes what matters about something is not what it is and where it comes from, but what it ends up doing. So I don't know. I never came up with a reason as to why the eggs do that.
Wow.
But once things went south for everyone, the eggs served a purpose, which is that Asmodeus used the eggs to basically secure the armory, right? So these things that the party has had with them this whole time is like, well, what is that for? Surely something's going to happen. And it's like, yeah, it turned out that it was a bad thing. But that's where the eggs were going all along.
Okay.
Wow.
Yeah, there's a lot of unsatisfying things about the Void Saga, and I'm mostly okay with that. I I've definitely gotten some questions that are like, so around when did you decide that I was going to hate this? And I think that's okay. The things that I find valuable about the story and about, the things that I think are good about the story, some of that ambiguity is part of it. And you're definitely not going to make me feel bad for leaving some stuff ambiguous. Not that Sam was trying to do that. I'm saying, because I get some passive aggressive stuff online sometimes.
I love the ambiguity, though.
Yeah,
I love a story that has that ambiguity that reminds you of real life, because things do not wrap up in perfect seasons with every single answer in real life. And sometimes it's 20 years down the line and you realize, holy crap, that girl was flirting with me. And that to me makes it more immersive, makes it more real, makes it a more satisfying in the fact that it's unsatisfying experience.
Any other big questions from anyone?
If you had to play another character and you can't pick Randus because everybody says Randus, who would you play?
Ket.
Wow. That was fast.
Torque. Because mechanics or because narrative or both?
Well, it depends. I mean, do we get to play, do we start over from the beginning and we get to do, do I get to play Ket all the way through? And
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sure.
Oh, yeah, definitely Ket. Not because of the mechanics or anything, just because of his wicked backstory of the Cobalt Alley and the deals and the back dealings that he's doing.
I'm 100% Torque.
Huh.
Yeah.
He's
be careful though.
The only other character I can talk like.
It's more in the back of your throat is what it is when you get like that. There,
you got to have that jaw jutted out just right?
Yeah, you got to do the underbite in your mouth, and then you got to go, hello. See, if I could play my answer is actually an NPC, because I'd play the ninja in the knife. I love that guy, because whenever he comes out, you can see Rodrigo, you can feel Rodrigo just acting like John Lovett's acting, and I love it. I don't even remember his name. What is his name?
Salath,
the ninja. Love that.
I know you said not to say Randus, but it would definitely be Randus. I just think that leaders in 4E are super neat, and I think that I'd have a lot of fun coming up with weird inventions.
Randus is off the table.
That's all right.
Too bad.
She can play Randace Randus.
Oh right, I remember.
There we go. Off-brand Randus.
Yeah,
Randus from Earth 531.
Yep.
Brian, do you have an answer to that one?
I've been thinking.
He's like, Randus is so cool. Why would I play any y'all chumps?
Man, Torque would be fun.
Okay.
I think I'd have to go with Torque, yeah.
Fighters, 4th edition, another plus for 4th edition. The only time fighters have ever been good. So
actually, fighters are really good in 5th edition.
Oh, well, that's good. Is it because they stole mechanics from 4th edition?
They
don't want you to know that.
Okay.
Yeah, they basically, fighters in 5th edition all get like the dwarves second wind, and they get to action surge, which is like basically make an extra attack at too low level normally. They're very good.
Yeah. All right, so
and they get to legitimately tank like they do in 4E, which is what makes all the difference.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I've got the final question to throw down, but I don't want to cut anybody off if there's anything else that we haven't hit. Anybody else?
What happened to
questions?
Gla is presumed dead.
The other two were alive. What happened to Gla?
Well,
we had to eat him to survive.
So if you want to know sort of narratively what happened to Gla, why did Gla not come back?
Because he was of Melora's, so presumably he would have been on Melora's.
Presumably, I mean that's as good a theory as any. But I just wanted you to get the gold. I just wanted you to play more.
No
people.
one is even
close
to the number of characters you made me play.
Or I can get Rob to play yet another character, and thus completely put everybody else out of the running. Nobody can catch up to Rob as far as characters played in this game or podcast.
This is extremely random and just possibly, again, there's no good reason for it, but with the Gamma spit, like everyone, like, so when Orm drank it, he became like super extra elfy, and when Sakara drank it, he became super extra vampire-y, and when Sparkle drank it, like basically nothing happened.
No, not nothing happened. What happened?
She had like a better sense of smell? Because of the rat! Oh, man, that was foreshadowing.
There's a seed for you.
That's pretty good.
See, I'm always doing it.
I realized I misanswered a question earlier.
What's that?
The regret. Not stopping the party from trying to steal Rafaga's friggin' head.
Oh, yeah.
I knew it was a mistake the second Sam suggested it.
But that was so much fun. I mean,
So much fun.
I just wanted to pull off a heist.
Yep. And we didn't, so you can still want it.
Well, she's going off with some people who seem to be pretty good at certain aspects of heisting. One of them is a very good planner and liar, and one of them can knock down walls. So
there you go.
So people are obviously concerned that Critical Hit is going to end. Stephen has been reassuring so many people on Twitter and presumably on other social media. And a bunch of the mailbag questions did ask, is everybody going to stay with Critical Hit as you do other games? Is anybody moving on? What do you want to say about the future?
So the big thing of what is next. So the Void Saga is over. Critical Hit is not. So if you say, "Oh, I'm so sorry to hear that Critical Hit has ended," it has not ended. Please do not continue to spread that statement. The Void Saga is over. Critical Hit will continue. So here is what is coming up. Next is Inspectors Boise, followed by and this is something that's been sitting around for over a year now, I want to say. It is the beta of Sentinels of the Multiverse. So we've got that we play through. And then after that, we're heading to the stars in a little TV show called Drifters. You're going to have to wait about 8 weeks to find out what that is all about. No one, to my knowledge, is leaving anytime soon. If they are, it would be definitely a surprise to me. But there may be some other people joining in the near future as well.
And some of the incoming episodes don't have everyone in this current crew because they were recorded at like random different times, and scheduling was an issue sometimes. And there were other people coming in and going. So,
so there's people that come in.
If you get to the next one and I'm not there, don't freak out.
Yeah.
Like there are some episodes of Sentinels that I couldn't make it because I was traveling a bunch at that time.
Yeah, and I think who was gone for Inspectors? Was that you, Rob?
Yeah, we did that one because I wanted to do the Core 21 pre-release, and that was a terrible mistake.
Regret that Rob has.
Obviously, that didn't happen. So that'll give you an idea.
So bad.
So that'll give some people an idea of, how long some of these things have been sitting around. So if you want to think about that Core 21 release, that was 6 months ago.
It was July.
Like July. So a couple of 6 months ago. Yes. And then, as I said, that Sentinels of the Multiverse beta before the final release came out, like I said, that was recorded over a year ago. That was recorded probably around the same time as Shadow of the Demon Lord, or right around that. So that was like 2018, 2019, when we were doing parts of that. So those are, just to give you a heads up, the next 3 games that are coming down the pipe. The Inspectors Boise is 2 episodes. Sentinels of the Multiverse, I think, is 6 or 7 episodes. I think it's 6.
Yeah, something like that.
I
think we did a post-wrap.
And then probably around 20-25 episodes of the Drifters game, somewhere around there. And then we'll have more things to come after that. So we hope that you're going to stick around. I hope you want to explore some different game engines, anything from more Fate Accelerated, Bubblegum Shoe, Lancer, I suppose, at some point in the future.
Maybe we'll see.
Maybe we'll see. So, yeah. So here's Drumstick's number 1 fan. Inspector, Sentinels of the Multiverse, and Drifters, ? Yep, that's exactly right. In fact, if you do pay attention, somebody accused me the other day, Rodrigo, of being a troll to our listeners. When people were like, what's coming up? And I literally listed all of those games in my reply, and no one picked up on it for like 2 weeks.
To be fair, you did make them answer these questions 3 before you did that.
One of us only lies.
You are known for your expert level trolling.
Nobody
I don't know
knows
if
what
that's
their favorite
trolling as
color
much
is.
as I gave you the answer in plain sight and you did not grasp that golden ring.
That is literally trolling.
Yeah, why'd you hold the golden ring out? Yeah, that's what I'm talking about.
I wasn't yanking it away. The troll would yank it away.
Yeah.
Matthew would yank it away.
Hey.
So here's the other thing. If you are a Gold VIP member listening to this, the other thing I would suggest that you do is take part in the monthly VIP live chat that we do with all of our Gold level members and higher. At what point, maybe a year ago, probably right around or maybe longer, when we were just starting into, I would say probably halfway through Devilish Research. We had a VIP episode where I listed all the other games that are coming up. So those are some other things you can go and track down and find those answers. Texora has a question. So, Stephen, now that you've played your first D&D campaign, what do you think of D&D and how does it compare to World of Warcraft? Well, I think Sam answered it earlier. It's exactly the same. There's so many similarities between them. So as much grief as I get, and Sam, you weren't, I don't think you've gone back to listen to those early episodes, because all I was doing was saying, oh, well, this is just like WoW. This is just like WoW. And it drove the listeners insane because it's like, what does this guy keep comparing this to WoW? It's nothing alike.
And to be fair, that was a huge perceived problem with 4th edition, and you just walked right into that.
Yeah, because it's exactly what it was, and that's what they were trying to go after for that. So if it walks like a duck and smells like a duck, then there's certainly a reason why my character's name, Orym Rivendorn, might have been named after a WoW character named Rivendorn.
Why you know what a duck smells like is an entirely different question.
Oh, you mean you don't snuggle up to your duck every night, Matthew?
In Kansas.
Man. All right,
duck
everybody.
Sniffing is not on my agenda.
Then it should be. That'll get rid of that scratchy throat that you got going. All right, everybody. I think that wraps it up for this episode of Critical Hit. I want to thank Tasha Robinson from Polygon for stepping in and doing all of the hard, heavy lifting this month. Thank you so much, Tasha, for being a part of this episode.
Well, thank you for both indulging my endless, bottomless curiosity about this game and for entertaining me nonstop for the past 11 years.
Well, where can people find more of you and reach out and also nerd out with you?
They can come nerd out with me about Critical Hit on Twitter. I'm just Tasha Robinson. That's all one word. I'm pretty easy to find. I write for and work for Polygon.com as a film and TV editor.
There you go.
And I'm part of a podcast of my own that's about cinema. It's called The Next Picture Show, and it's specifically about taking new films and pairing them up with old films that they have something in common with. Nice.
Very, very nice. Let's see. Rob, where can people find you?
At Bore Immortal.
And Samantha, where can people find you?
At Samantha Nelson 1.
D&D Brian.
They can find me at DND Brian. That's the letter N, not the ampersand, because you can't use those for Twitter handles.
Matthew.
Hello, at Mighty King Cobra.
And Rodrigo.
You can find me at Fearsome Critter on Twitter, and you can buy a book I wrote.
You wrote a book?
Which is, that's right, The Tale of Tallest Rabbit. You can find it on Amazon, or you can apparently go to like indie websites and get them to do that. So, or order it through your bookstore, and then your local bookstore actually gets a share of that. So do that as well.
And don't forget, you can follow everything we do at Major Spoilers or majorspoilers.com. And until next week, when you get your next game, Inspectors, Boise. Here's hoping all of your dice rolls are critical hits.
This podcast is copyright 2020 by Major Spoilers Entertainment, LLC.